Yeah, we're going live. Hi all, thanks for joining. We'll give a minute for people to join. As we speak now, the people are trying to log in. Just now 1 o'clock. I think it will take a minute for people to assemble now. Let us give a minute for all to join. Yeah. I think that is fine. I think we are 1 minute after 1 o'clock now. As I know, the people will start logging in. There are already people on the bridge too. So probably we'll get started while others join the session. Hi all, formal good morning, good afternoon to you all, and warm welcome to the webinar. This webinar is being sponsored by EY. My name is Santosh Joshi, Director of Events for PMI Ireland chapter, and I'll be your host today. Okay. This webinar is being recorded for the future reference. Today's webinar topic is the 6 operational levers of decarbonization. Interesting to see here is what is in it for you to attend this webinar and take away the message. And this is very interesting because this decarbonization, the topic is almost everywhere now, right? As a management professionals, we need to find a way to drive the organizations to run the program that will help them to achieve this decarbonization. Is there any particular framework? Is there any particular thinking line that we need to be looking after for planning? And this is exactly what you are going to take away from this webinar. We have the eminent speakers with us today who have been in this field, done that, and experienced. They can put across the levers of the framework to drive the decarbonization. Let me introduce Katie. Katie is a partner in EY Business Consulting team and is focused on helping clients to drive the opportunities that have arisen due to disruption caused by the decarbonization, digitization, and decentralization. Decarbonization and digitization are felt across almost all fields nowadays. And this also is creating the opportunities which we need to help the customer to tap to. And Katie comes with that experience of leading the organizations to tap those opportunities and kind of design and implement the operating model to kind of take the best benefit of these disruptions. Katie is also a sustainability director for the PMI Ireland chapter. Katie, it is our great pleasure to welcome you today.
Thank you, Santosh.
Going to the next slide. This is my pleasure to introduce Dara Kelly. Dara is a senior consultant in a transformation delivery team. He has been involved in driving this sustainability since from a long time. And he worked with the customers across UKI to drive these initiatives. He specialized in a customer service, management, and public speaking and business consulting areas. He is also going to give us an insight into the decarbonization framework today, and that we all will be benefiting. Without any much delay, let me welcome both Dara and Katie to take the session about this framework. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Santosh, and good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be with you today here in what is the first of a series of sustainability webinars. It's going to be the first within what we're setting up as the sustainability community of practice. So there's a couple of community of practices that are established as part of the PMI. It's kind of a new concept into the PMI. There's one for the PMO, and then looking at sustainability as this new one. And what we want to do with that is create a space for project managers to know where to come to get information on how to drive sustainability programs, and also how to understand how sustainability impacts their program and how it needs to be an outcome of what they're working on. It's not always obvious, it's not always clear whether it is a sustainability program. Some people start out with an IT project, some people start out with a supply chain program, but actually where we are moving towards in the future means that we need to ensure that we always look at sustainability and social purpose as ways to really drive and improve outcomes for the businesses that we work with. So we really want this community to be established, to set up and share ideas, have a place to come and learn all of the aspects effectively of sustainability and how you can bring that to your program. How you can get involved, well, listen today is number one, so thank you and you're all welcome to be here today. In addition, we're going to issue a survey to everybody who's attended today to really try to understand what are the topics that you want to understand from sustainability. So welcome, you are now effectively our pilot group, whether you chose to sign up for that or not, but you can choose to continue to engage if you like. So we'll use you as our pilot group to survey you, understand what we would like to do within an Irish base around sustainability. And then in September, we're going to do a full launch and ask people to register to be a part of the community of practice, where they will get updates and newsletters around sustainability and how to drive those programs going forward. So looking at the next slide, some of the slides you'll see today, you may be familiar with if you attended the PMI conference, and I would love to get a bit of a view of that in the chat if you can pop in to confirm if you were at that PMI conference. And we're not going to drain those slides, it's just a bit of my introduction this morning. But Dara will take us through the 6 operational levers that really show how you can do this and how you can bring sustainability to life in your projects. What are the areas that you would touch and what are the levers that you can use in your organizations? But let me frame that a little bit for you. So we believe that we're on a cusp of a great transformation, a period of significant action taking around sustainability and around climate change. And we've never seen this level before. Opportunistically, I would say we need to do this and we will do this, but there is a risk that we could squander that opportunity and become incapable of moving forward. And I guess that really introduces the critical role of the project manager. It's our role to bring to life the need for sustainability in programs. It's our role to bring to life the outcomes that we want to get from sustainability programs and from standard programs that have a sustainability outcome attached to them. And in my daily interaction with clients, I definitely see that project managers are believed to be that strong, right hand that can bring great confidence in delivery and great confidence to decision makers that they need to do this. So in being a part of this conversation, it really means that you're educating yourself and your business to bring this information back and help them make decisions around sustainability and moving it forward. So I think there's going to be continued demand. I think there's going to be a big increase in demand. I described it recently to somebody as if you look at digital and the journey we've taken through digital. We started out with e-commerce, we had the .com boom, and then we came to digital, and that's been evolving over the last number of years. So that's in effect 3 different versions, version 1, 2, and 3 of how we've gotten through digital. And I think sustainability is really at the version 2. We're not really at the version 3 where everybody sees the need, everybody sees the opportunity to leverage it, and everybody sees the benefit and how to go about it. And that's what our role needs to be over the next while, to kind of bring that to life. The stats on the slide here today are really showing you the outcomes from an EY sustainability report that we completed in January 2021. And what was surprising about that is, I guess, the inconsistency from our report last year in 2020 and not seeing a clear path. And I think people feel like they're effectively doing enough already. So 84% think they are doing enough, 20% are confident on achieving goals. So it's hard to see the correlation between those two. If you think you're doing enough, but you're not achieving your goals, only 20% are getting there. 40% report improvements in the bottom line from sustainability. So there's a long way to go around that. And no one cited that they thought they could grow profits from their organization by leading on sustainability programs. And I think some of that is because people don't want to be seen to be profiteering from sustainability But I think actually sustainable businesses need to be profitable businesses, and we need it to become our new way of working. 40% of people believe following compliance is doing enough. So I think maybe that's where the 84% gets that bump. We're doing enough, but we're not achieving goals. We're not achieving outcomes. There's a mismatch between those two. On the next slide, I think you can see the story building here. It's really clear that sustainability is in the news. Sustainability is in the press. It is real, and we're seeing the effects of climate change effectively day in, day out, and the different things that are happening. And some people would have the view that, well, actually news is more prevalent, more frequent, and we're getting more information from across the globe, and that's why this volume is increasing, when really not, there isn't. And I could drown you in stats and information that show that this is true, and that we need to move to getting to a regeneration, which I think is what 3.0 is going to look like for sustainability. I think we're going to move to talking about how can we regenerate the environment? How can we ensure that we are doing things that, you know, if we're cutting down trees for paper, whether it's for a business that's doing newspapers, some other area of supply chain, even toilet roll, whatever it is, how do we get to a place where we're then planting the trees to replace? And we're doing that on a scale that actually is getting a return in and regenerating the environment, especially when these things take a long time to grow and to flourish. So getting those ecosystems and those cycles working. So I won't dwell on the bad news. I won't focus here on those headlines, but I think it gives an indication that the climate crisis is now, and that we can see it everywhere. On the next slide, you'll see a picture of somebody who's suffering and dealing with it being everywhere. They're in their canoe and water is everywhere. As I see the flooding, I've heard today that there's wildfires in Portugal, and a lot of holidaymakers are getting impacted by those. These are the types of events that we're going to see more and more of over the next number of years. Crisis management around sustainability is another area where project managers will really be looked at to come in and help to have those plans in place of what you might do to support when something does happen. So I think the thing is, when it comes to it, if we don't have the tools, if we don't understand the scope of change that we need, if we don't have, you know, the time to make the changes, we're going to be in that panic mode. We're going to be in constant crisis management, and we're going to have to deal with these situations, and we need to get ahead of that. On the next slide, we need change. That's what people are looking for. And you can see that we do need change, and we need change in behaviours, not just in behaviours of, you know, people recycling and all of those circular economy elements of sustainability, but we need change in the way people are thinking about these things, and bringing sustainability into every project and programme we do, bringing social value and social change into every project that we do. So there's a connection between big business and society, and driving the two together. Looking at the next slide, you see a burning forest, and like this is an indicator of, you know, when a forest is burning, often what they'll do is create a fire break and cut down a flame of trees so that there's nothing to burn, and that helps to stop the fire. A circuit breaker, as people would have talked about during COVID, actually is kind of a similar approach. And that's what we need now. We need to establish that kind of fire break in our approach, and we need to get to a common language, target setting, and setting budgets around sustainability in large organizations. Those targets then will invite leaders to take action, to be proactive, and to set up programs of work that, whether or not they're going to drive new value creation for the company, they'll at least protect the company and make it more sustainable, driving better outcomes for the future. So how do you understand what that is? What does that look like? On the next slide, you see an iceberg, and it's a really easy way to kind of consider that. Often people think about the operational and facility elements that they can do, and the projects that they can take on at that level, and they don't necessarily connect with the detail of what lies beneath. What are the other projects and programs that actually feed into that we all need to be a part of, and we all need to be mindful of how sustainability impacts those. The next slide shows you some of the scope of those projects. So these are things that aren't necessarily in direct control from a sustainability perspective, but actually we need to link the two together. So looking at supply chain, looking at procurement, logistics and distribution, having really clear data that's flowing to show the impact of the business on the environment, on climate change, and making sure to get that feedback loop. And, there'll be carbon targets, that carbon trading is going to come into place where we're all going to have to meet and manage carbon targets. So that data accountability and data management is going to become really, really key. We're going to see more change, and that's going to impact from a regulatory perspective on risk and controls. As a result, then that will drive into your HR, finance and CRM systems on the legal support that you're getting and into the ERP. Looking then into the next slide, I think there are a number of other elements that we need to consider and we need to be aware of. We're looking at circular economy, driving biodiversity, whether we're looking at health and wellness and the well-being of people in our organisations, wider poverty, housing for all, ensuring that there is enough housing in place. All of these things drive and impact how we do business in Ireland. Gender equality, having diversity of thought, ensuring that the right people are at the table to bring that breadth of thinking and bring sustainability into the conversation. And then reducing inequalities, whether that be to gender pay gaps and other elements of sustainability and carbon taxes that need to be brought into the equation to really drive the change. So I guess, this picture in the background is really showing that there are a number of icebergs out in that ocean. And each of these has the operational pieces that we can do and control above the line. But below that waterline, there's so many other elements of projects that we need to be thinking about connecting together. And as project managers, we need to understand how we can use operational levers for sustainability to really drive our projects forward and get a good sustainability outcome for that business. On the next slide, I guess what we're looking for you to do as project managers is really help to build the ladder between these icebergs, between these mountains, and help to drive us forward into a greener future, into a more sustainable future, and bridge that gap between that sustainability 2.0 that we're sitting in now and getting to regeneration, which will be sustainability 3.0 ideally. And we'll see a lot of projects and programs coming and people really buying into driving sustainability in business and for the environment as a whole. And as a project manager, I guess your role becomes really important in doing that. It means that you can effectively, get on that ladder first, be brave, create the ropes along the side to bring people along with you and give confidence that actually it is possible to drive towards sustainability KPIs, to get outcomes and to drive value and look for ways for value creation for your businesses through sustainability. I think the project manager is seen as a really safe pair of hands, someone who can get this done, who's done it before in different complex environments. So sustainability is just another one that you need to follow that process through on. And I think getting that confidence in your leadership teams are really important. So let's look at some of the levers that you can use in your companies to decarbonize, drive sustainability through your projects. And I'd like to introduce Dara Kiley, who's going to take us through the next section and through those operational levers.
Thanks very much, Katie, and hi everyone. And yeah, as Katie just kind of alluded to, sustainability is a topic we hear all the time now, but it is such a broad topic. And today we're just going to be focusing on decarbonization and how you, as a project manager, hopefully in the next 20 minutes or half an hour, I can give you a good starting point for what's required when thinking about decarbonization and designing a program. And we'll also take a look at some of the questions that PMs should be kind of asking themselves and looking to understand in order for that transformation to be a success. Because I think decarbonization is a topic which is new to a lot of people, and for that reason, people are kind of intimidated by the idea of managing a transformation like that. But it's not that different to other transformations, like Katie mentioned digital a while ago. And my hope here is that you come away from the session a little bit more confident and just with, as I said, a basis for how you would go about decarbonizing your organization. So we'll start with an overarching framework which has 3 phases and 7 steps across those 3 phases. And that'll give you kind of a framework for managing that transformation. And then following on from that, we'll dive into the 6+1 operational levers that PMs across all businesses, all sectors, all sizes can pull to decarbonize their business. So the 6 levers are process effectiveness and efficiency to reduce carbon, greening your energy supply, product transformation, value chain management, and green procurement, circular economy, business model innovation, and then we have the +1, which are our compensation and neutralization measures. So this is essentially just offsetting the emissions that you can't eliminate through the other 6 levers. Because even when you have pulled all of these levers to decarbonize your business, the chances are you won't be able to remove all your emissions. So some element of neutralization and offsetting is required. It's quite a contentious topic, but we'll get to it in a while. So this is our kind of overarching framework that sits above these levers, and we believe that every project manager can use this framework to transform the business. So it has 3 steps, and the first of those is planning net zero. So I guess the first question you'd ask is, okay, what are the opportunities and risks related to the net zero transition? So what we really want PMs to be able to do here is to understand their current emissions baselines, and from that point then figure out, okay, which of the 6 levers you can have most success with, what are the kind of quick wins. But in order to do that, you really have to understand your emissions baselines, and then once you've done that, you can identify the opportunities that are available to reduce them, and also identify any risks you see and try and mitigate them before they become too much of a problem. And the second point then is an important one. So is the strategy value led? So really, for a net zero strategy to be worth anything, it has to be embedded in the overall business strategy. If it's not, then it's just words on a page. It doesn't really mean anything. So you have to create a plan and a strategy that ultimately creates long-term value for your business, as well as reducing emissions. And then, you know, that follows on to the next question is, how do you build a business case for net zero that achieves buy-in from everyone right across the board? And I think if one of the biggest challenges for businesses and for project managers who are trying to be more sustainable is that a lot of the time the projects are kind of managed, they're operated, they're measured across different profit centers, different departments within the organization. So when change is proposed, the primary consideration is the financial impact by the department. And it's rare that they sit back and say, okay, what's the cost of doing nothing here? Similarly, you know, the cost of benefit is generally measured in financial terms. It's rarely, you know, environmental value or societal value is rarely given the kind of appropriate gravitas, I suppose. And most businesses have taken steps to become more sustainable, but we still see a lot of businesses and clients that are stuck kind of on this path, kind of this transitional path. And often the cause of the delay or the stalling is the emphasis that's been placed on the individual cost centers, which then frustrates that kind of holistic decision making that we're looking for. So you have an environment where departments start making kind of polarizing decisions because all they're thinking about is what works for them and their own financial performance. And this kind of fragmented decision making, it fails to look at the bigger picture. So this is where we need kind of project and program managers to be that kind of linchpin for the organization. The second step then is the transformation. It's where the bulk of the work takes place. And the first question a PM might ask themselves in this stage is, okay, we have a business case. How do we go about actually financing the transformation? What do we need? Do we need to invest in new technology to achieve our goals? That sort of thing. And I'll discuss this in more detail when we get to the levers about, you know, greening energy supplies and transforming products, but there are financing schemes available which support organizations who are trying to decarbonize. And then the second point here, how does the overall operating model need to change to achieve the net zero targets? This is where we implement the 6+1 operational decarbonization levers in an attempt to create kind of an operating model that supports our strategic ambition that we set out in the planning stage. The next one, behavior changes, it's kind of often overlooked, but it's a critical element in achieving your net zero target. So how can you as a PM implement that change? And, you know, to be successful in transformations, and it's no different for decarbonization, is organizations need to put their people right at the heart of it. So it requires kind of a shift in the way that leaders engage with their people by listening, by kind of identifying the internal SMEs, internal champions who are there to kind of co-create a new vision for the future, and then use this energy to kind of galvanize the workforce and then drive the transformation. So you really need everyone rowing in the same direction, as well as things like, upskilling, training, and just even smaller things like making sure that your teams can live sustainable working lives, whether that means remote working, flexible working, and just making sure they're living healthier kind of work lives. So it's important not to overlook that kind of human aspect of it as well. And then the third step is the building trust. And even though it's the third step here, it actually runs right the way through. So it begins at the very start with the planning. And we know that tracking progress is not easy, and without doing it effectively and communicating it against your pledges that you laid out at the very beginning, it leaves you kind of open to accusations, greenwashing. We're seeing that more and more. I read this morning, KLM are faced with another court date by a group of activists over there, kind of greenwashing, stuff like that. So from the beginning, you have to figure out how you're going to build trust with all your stakeholders, both internally and externally, as you plan and then move through the transformation. And I guess you kind of just do that by, any other transformation, ensuring that you have the correct systems, controls in place that, help you to monitor emissions, report emissions, your progress. So really, transparency is the key in building this trust, and then communicating your progress is what will build that transparency and that trust. And I've touched on it already, but it's about bringing all your key stakeholders along with you on that decarbonization journey. And then I guess in the more kind of technical side of things, you need to be comfortable with, what financial reporting standards your organization needs to comply with. You need to be comfortable with that non-financial data, make sure it's well defined, accurate, that it's easy for people to understand. So that's our kind of overarching 7-step, 3-phase framework that we believe will get any organization to net zero. But we'll take a look at the individual levers now. And I'm conscious that I'm kind of doing all the talking here, and I'm keen to get your thoughts as well and things. So maybe as I'm moving through the levers, if you want to kind of start dropping, what you see as the biggest challenge with each lever for a project manager is, or anything like that, any questions, just drop them in the chat box, and we'll be keeping an eye on it, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to kind of address a few of those. So the first lever is process effectiveness and efficiency. So this is just reducing emissions through making your own current operating approach more efficient, without that requirement to really invest in entirely new approaches or large-scale innovations. Because your net zero journey has to start somewhere, and this is often it's your first real opportunity to make significant progress. And this is because that the emissions from this part are the easiest to kind of quantify, and then they're the easiest to address because they're under your control. So it's predominantly your scope 1 emissions. And I guess at this point, I should probably just clarify for those who are new to the topic, the difference between scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So your scope 1 emissions, the one I'm talking about now, they cover all of your direct emissions. So from any assets you own or control. So if your business owns, office buildings, factories, company vehicles, things like that, all the emissions generated by these facilities fall into the scope 1 category. Scope 2 then is indirect emissions from any of your purchased energy. So your electricity, your heating, your cooling, refrigeration, all that energy that's consumed that you purchase is your scope 2. And then scope 3 is where it gets a bit tricky. So that's all of the other indirect emissions that occur within an organization's wider value chain. And it's the most difficult category to collect data for, because these activities are usually much further along, they're much further along the value chain, both upstream and downstream. So where your organization might not even have direct contact with suppliers. So things like purchase goods and services, business travel, employee commuting, even your investments, that sort of stuff. So it's a lot harder to kind of quantify and measure and then keep track of. So when we're talking about the scope 1 and improving your process effectiveness and efficiency, it's the low-hanging fruit. It's all of the things which you have direct control over. So it's fast action that you can take towards reducing your emissions, and it's generally probably the most sensible first step. And a lot of the time, by improving your process efficiency, it results in reduced costs. I came across an article yesterday morning in Business Green, and it was a survey done by a group called Make UK. And this part kind of stood out to me. It said that energy efficiency is a critical pillar of most companies' climate plans, with 47% of companies noting that energy conservation is the key focus of their emission reduction projects. So I think it's really interesting to hear how almost half of all organizations are looking at something so simple as energy conservation as their main focus. And things even as simple as, you know, training factory floor workers how to turn on and off machines. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, it sounds simple, but people often overlook these things and they often have a significant impact. So it's kind of going back to square one and looking at it from there. So as a PM, I guess the first step in making your process more efficient is measuring the emission impact of your current process. So having that as a benchmark to refer back to is hugely important, and you can kind of refine it from that point. And of course, then, as I said already, communicating those figures, engaging your employees with net zero is also really important, because at the end of the day, those employees are going to be the ones dealing with the business as usual stuff. So after that, we have the second lever, which is greening your energy supply, and it is exactly what it says it is, switching your energy supply from fossil fuels to renewable sources. So, you know, in practice, this might look like acquiring a power purchase agreement for renewable energy, or switching from natural gas to green hydrogen, for example. And it's just a critical action in pursuit of your net zero targets, and there's no real getting around it. But depending on your business model, this can either be, you know, relatively simple through PPAs, or it can be more complicated if you're really reliant on fossil fuels. So, and then if you don't go down the route of PPAs, you know, it's a legal requirement for energy suppliers to actually publish details of their fuel mix. So, you know, what percentage of electricity they generate comes from renewable sources and what comes from fossil fuels. So all of the information is there for you. It's available for you to make an informed decision when choosing your energy supplier. And some organizations are even now going down the route of generating some of their own energy. And for the majority of businesses, that's through solar, because it's easy to install, and you know, it's cheap. I think since 2020, it's the cheapest source of energy we have in human history. And I think even wind is a bit more difficult, obviously, of course, because it requires a lot more space, investment, planning permission, that sort of thing. I guess a good example of it would be the Cork Harbour wind energy project. So down in Ringaskiddy in Cork, near where the naval base is, you have a lot of big chemical and pharmaceutical companies. So back in around 2008, 2009, Janssen, GSK, Novartis, and Depuy formed a group called the Cork Lower Harbour Energy Group. And it was in kind of response to, at the time, there was massive increase in energy prices similar to today, and they formed this group to both cut costs and saw it as an opportunity to cut emissions. So around 2014, I think, they had the 4 turbines built in the area, and I know GSK were able to account for around half of all of their energy from the wind that was generated, but for Janssen and Depuy, they were able to actually sell the surplus energy back to the grid. So it was a really, really successful project. Now, I know that's a kind of an extreme example, but, you know, switching your green energy, what it does is if switching to green energy, it future proofs your energy and your supply of it. And it's obviously hugely relevant at the moment because of the price of fossil fuels, and governments should really be using this as an opportunity to incentivize, you know, both homes and organizations to switch to green energy. And I guess your first step as a PM would just be to develop your energy strategy, which would include a business case. And looking at the long term here is really, really important. So, for example, the price of integrated PV solar panels are now getting closer and closer to the price of traditional slating for roofs. So when you factor in the free electricity that's generated throughout the year, it's a really sensible decision financially. So really looking at the bigger picture in the long term is really, really important for greening your energy supply. And then the third lever is product transformation. So in order
just before you get into product transformation, Darren, I think there's an interesting question there in the chat. just saying, you know, with the current pressures on inflation and the overall cost of living crisis that's happening now, will projects for sustainability be the first ones to drop? I don't know what your view is. My quick view on that is actually no, quite the opposite, because I think some of the great examples you're calling out there, actually there are ways to save money and improve and actually bringing that to the wider environment and the wider ecosystem ensures that people will actually make bigger savings.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you'd hope that would be the case, but I think a lot of it depends on policy. Like we saw the UK government introduced two or 3 weeks ago, they announced the windfall tax. So 60% they were charging energy companies on their profits because they said they're earning too much. Okay, we're going to charge you 60% windfall tax. But what they really did was, if you read through it, they said any energy company who starts to extract more oil and gas for the next 12 months because there's a shortage will get a 91% tax relief on this 60%. So that's crazy enough. But what was even worse was that they didn't include renewables. So if you invest your profits in renewable sources, you weren't eligible for that 91% tax relief. It was just for oil and gas. So it really, I think the government have a big part to play here in policy and incentivizing people to use this opportunity to drive more sustainable solutions. But it's a really interesting question, and you'd hope that it would be kind of a catalyst for a green transition. It should be. But yeah, a really interesting question. So product transformation. So in order to transform your product, you must really kind of view your product portfolio through the lens of greenhouse gas emissions, and then transform your offering, not just to lower emissions, but to also increase attractiveness to customers who are, of course, becoming a lot more conscious of what they're buying and what goes into making it and stuff like that. So if net zero isn't possible while maintaining business as usual, so levers 1 and 2, then we have to innovate. And you know, this could simply mean improving the longevity of a product. So designing a product to make sure that it lasts longer, things like that, and you know, or ensure that the products use less waste and pollution when they eventually get passed on to the consumers. Or it could mean designing a product for circularity so that it's standardized, it's compatible, it's easy to dismantle and repair parts are readily available, things like that. But we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the circular economy piece. But like with green energy, tax incentives are available to large companies who are kind of undertaking these projects. And you know, where businesses are looking to undertake projects related to emissions reduction or waste reduction, obviously these incentives can help lower the financial burden and risk. So really, again, you need to start this process of transforming your products by embedding your net zero ambitions into whatever corporate R&D function already exists, and then go about getting financed for developing the solutions. So the benefits really of transforming your products is that when you make them more sustainable, it results in an increased appeal to customers. As well, it's a big signal of intent to the business and engaging them with a sustainable future. So, and that's something we'll keep going back to, is that employee engagement and everybody moving in the same direction with the end goal of net zero in mind. So then the next one is, as I said, where it gets a bit tricky. This is the value chain management and green procurement. So these, as I said, are your emissions, which you're not directly producing, but you're still actually responsible for. So your supply chains, transportation, that kind of stuff. And these always represent the largest proportion of an organization's emissions. So the scope 3 that we spoke about a minute ago, efforts placed into decarbonizing your value chain, can actually be really, really transformative for an organization and their net zero targets, because it accounts for so much of their emissions. And the first step of it is kind of related to the previous lever, and that's designing the product itself, making it more circular. But it also includes kind of, you know, you've all heard the term sustainable sourcing. So that kind of, what sustainable sourcing does is it brings, I guess, environmental performance factors into the process of procurement and actually selecting your suppliers. And, you know, includes purchasing sustainably preferable products and services, you know, ones that are made from recycled or remanufactured materials, that kind of thing. And then internally also developing kind of decision frameworks that include criteria such as carbon, waste, water consumption, land use, all that kind of stuff. It means thinking about things like supply chain visibility, traceability, so deploying and investing in technology that actually allows you to track the origin of the materials and the quality of those materials that you're using. And actually technologies like blockchain now can enable the traceability and kind of the proof of origin of these products. You know, when you combine it with Internet of Things and AI, you can actually use blockchain to monitor the quality, compliance, and you know, it just provides a level of transparency that across the supply chain. And again, similar to choosing your energy suppliers, by partnering with suppliers to align your net zero targets, you're future-proofing your supply chain, and also at the same time kind of developing long-term sustainability-oriented relationships. So you'd map your value chain by scale and also to the kind of degree of control that you have over them, and then try your best to incentivize everyone else along your supply chain towards net zero. And as you do that, then you can kind of try build, I guess, coalitions across various suppliers, and you all have the same goal and work as kind of one unit. And we spoke about it briefly a minute ago, but circular economy is the next lever. And it's a concept that you've all heard of. You know, it's a concept that looks beyond the traditional make, waste, or make, take, make, dispose approach, and instead towards a kind of a make, remake, use, reuse model that aims to be, by design, regenerative. And I'm sure you've all heard about it. It's quite a broad topic with a lot to kind of digest, so I won't go into it too deep because I know we don't have time and this warrants a couple hours session on its own. But by transforming the way we make and dispose of resources, we're actually able to move to a system where we reuse materials, eliminating waste, and thus slashing our overall emission output. So in simplified terms, the aim is to keep materials and components in a constant sustainable cycle. And if long term, if this is implemented consistently, it could eventually kind of decouple future economic growth from resource consumption, because some people don't kind of understand that. But it ties in with the product transformation lever, so making packaging fully recyclable, things like that. We're also seeing a bit of a shift from kind of an ownership model to a more use-oriented model. So a good example of this is car sharing, like GoCar. So an organization's also moving to this model, even some phone companies, where you never actually gain ownership of the product. You pay like a monthly subscription, and the organization, you know, take care of maintenance, repairs, all that kind of thing, and you just use it as you need it. And then it also ties in with your value chain, your logistics that I mentioned in that lever. But similarly with all the other levers, for a circular strategy to really be successful, all of the ecosystem partners, so everyone along the chain, including suppliers, manufacturers, they all have to commit to this process and the same goal, and act as that single kind of unit. Otherwise, you're kind of fighting a losing battle, really. And then the final lever, I guess, before we move on to the neutralization and compensation measures, is business model innovation. Now, for some organizations, this is easier, but for some, it actually requires a large scale transformation in itself. So for a lot of businesses across various sectors, it'll be clear that, you know, reaching net zero is not going to be possible without taking a completely new approach to how you operate and how you create value. And I think that the best example of this is Ørsted, their company love. So for those of you who haven't heard of them, they're a Danish energy company, and you know, 2-3 decades ago they would have been one of the biggest emitters in Europe, biggest users of coal. But now they're kind of leading the way in the green energy transition. And by their own admission, it wasn't an easy thing to do. It took over a decade for them to transform their business model, that they're now a global leader in offshore wind power, and also offer solutions for things like solar and onshore wind. And it's really, really impressive kind of what they've done. So innovating your business model to remove, I guess, reliance on emission intensive practices is so important for your net zero goals, but also makes financial sense in the mid to long term. And the Ørsted CEO said that. He said that, you know, they wanted to find a business model that was both environmentally and financially sustainable. So if it's not creating value in the long term, it's not really a viable option. Also with Ørsted, through this kind of shift and by innovating into new areas where there wasn't a lot of people, they gained a huge advantage on competitors by moving fast. And it's just really impressive what they're doing. And I'd encourage anyone with a couple of minutes to take a look at their transition plan they have on their website. It's really, really impressive stuff. Now I do understand that's kind of an extreme example because it's an entire business transformation alone, but you know, even with the smaller business model innovations, it's the same thing, just on a smaller scale, like understanding your opportunities and risks and reporting, building trust, realizing value, that kind of stuff. So then finally we get on to the +1, which is the compensation and neutralization measures. So most organizations will need to offset to meet their targets, but this should really only be considered when all other reasonable measures across levers 1 to 6 have been implemented and a genuine, credible plan for achieving net zero emissions is in place. So then once that's established, then offsetting becomes an accepted practice. So what offsetting allows people to do is really just invest in different environmental projects around the world in order to kind of balance out their own carbon emissions. And they're usually designed, not always, but usually designed to reduce future emissions. So this might involve rolling out clean energy technologies, or you know, purchasing and then ripping up carbon credits from an emission trading scheme. Some other schemes work just by soaking up carbon directly from the air, so planting trees, that kind of thing. Like I'm sure you've all seen it when you're booking a flight to go somewhere and you can pay an extra €3 to offset the carbon emissions, but just obviously with business on it, it's on a much bigger scale. I'm not going to go into the whole carbon credits trading schemes today because, well, primarily because I don't really have my head around it yet. But offsetting is really contentious, and you can kind of see why people use it for the wrong reasons. People don't really make an attempt to cut their emissions before they start to offset. Like this should really just be used as a very, very last resort when you cannot cut your emissions any further. And yeah, like for a project manager, the next steps would be to create an offsetting plan, which is in line with your net zero plan, and then to really only try and invest in valid, real solutions that actually promote positive social impact. So, you know, instead of investing in something that just plants trees, you could look at investing in clean energy innovation or green tech innovation for developing countries, that kind of thing. But as I said, it's really kind of a last resort. But I guess the key takeaway is just that, you know, net zero strategy, for it to be successful, has to be embedded in the overall business strategy. And you as a project manager are kind of responsible for being that linchpin and the driver for the rest of the organization, as Katie said, for whatever part of the business is pulling a lever. And now that organizations have to put decarbonization at the heart of their own transformational agenda, they have to focus on building a wide range of skill sets across, you know, sustainability, tech, people, risk, finance. And because the levers all sit across these various functions in the business, your role isn't necessarily to pull all 6 of these levers, but rather to coordinate and kind of enable collaboration between all of the different parties to identify, deliver, and then realize the benefits of the transformation and reaching net zero. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I know we're kind of gone over a bit in time, but I really appreciate you sticking with me, because I know it's a pretty nice day outside, and I'm conscious people might want to go outside and get some fresh air before going back from their breaks. But thanks very much for listening. If you have any questions, happy to take a few, or if not, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to kind of talk with you there.
Thanks a lot, Dara.
Over to Santosh, I think.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Dara. That was the interesting and most useful session for us to get the inputs. There was one question on the chat. I'm not sure if it is addressed. Let me read out. If it is addressed, it is good. If not, you can take this question. Question coming from Mark Gannon. With the cost of living crisis and inflationary pressures on the business, will the sustainability project be the first one to cut off on the budget part?
Thanks, Santosh. I think that's the question we covered coming through the presentation, and conclusion is it's complex. If you invest in these programs, there's savings to be made, but there's a long way to go, and we don't have the opportunity to wait, I think, are the summaries from that answer.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So, thanks a lot for all of your time to join this session. I'm sure, like, I personally got a lot of information from this one to drive any decarbonization project or a program that runs for the organization. I'm sure you also got the value out of this session. For attending this session, you also will get a PDUs, which is with a PDU code that is shown on the screen. If you have registered with a PMI ID, then this PDU credit will be given to you automatically. If not, then there is still not an issue. You can make a note of this PDU code and claim yourself through the PDU claim code. Yeah. Again, thanks a lot for all your time for joining, and you have a nice day today. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.